Hey guys, welcome back to Moonlight Tales. Tonight's story comes straight from the depths of Reddit. It's one of those stories that stays with you long after the audio ends. So do yourself a favor, put on your earphones, dim the lights, and get comfortable because this isn't just a war story. It's about a grandmother, a dream, and a premonition that saved her and her infant child from a bomb during World War II. Some call it coincidence. Others call it instinct. But after hearing this, you might call it something else entirely. Let's begin. Growing up, there was always a specific, haunting way my grandmother looked at the ceiling. It wasn't the look of someone daydreaming. It wasn't nostalgia. It was the look of someone waiting for the plaster to finally give way and surrender to the sky. She hated loud noises, even something ordinary, like a car door slamming on a quiet Sunday, made her flinch. A packed go-bag sat by the front entrance until the day she died. For most of my life, I dismissed it, just the eccentricity of an old woman who had survived a hard century. I told myself the war had simply left her with bad nerves. But one humid Tuesday afternoon, in a kitchen that smelled of burnt toast and old lace, she sat me down and told me something that changed everything. She said my entire existence, and the existence of our whole family line, hung on the thread of a single terrifying dream. It was late 1944. The world wasn't just at war. It felt like the world was trying to consume itself. She lived in a small, cramped apartment in a city that had become a jagged target on a map, even though the people there still pretended life was normal. My father was 6 months old, quiet, observant, too quiet. She said that was the worst part. Even the infant seemed to know that silence was a kind of armor. My grandfather was hundreds of miles away at the front. That left her alone with a radio that crackled with sanitized lies, and a neighbor who checked the blackout curtains every 20 minutes, fluttering like a trapped bird. She told me something else. The exhaustion of being a solo parent in a war zone doesn't sit on your shoulders. It sinks into your marrow. It turns your blood into lead. That night, she fell into a sleep. That wasn't rest. It was closer to a coma. The air in the bedroom felt thick, like breathing through a wet wool blanket. In the dream, she wasn't in her apartment. She stood in the middle of an endless field of scorched wheat. The sky wasn't blue. It wasn't black. It was bruised, a pulsating purple, the color of a fresh wound. There was no wind, no birds, no distant artillery, only silence, crushing, absolute silence. Then she saw someone at the edge of the field. It was her mother, dead for 5 years, wearing the same floral apron. She used to bake sourdough. Her mother didn't speak. No hug, no comfort. She just raised a trembling finger and pointed at the ground beneath my grandmother's feet. She looked down. The earth softened, darkened, turned liquid. She began to sink, cold soil rising to her knees, her waist, and from deep below, she heard it. Not a scream, not an explosion, a ticking, mechanical, rhythmic, a clock, but beating like a human heart. Tick-thud, tick-thud. Her mother's eyes widened, frantic, urgent, silent. The finger never moved, as if to say, it's already here. My grandmother bolted awake. Her nightgown was soaked in cold, oily sweat. The apartment was deathly still, blackout curtains pinned tight. The only sound, the shallow breathing of the baby beside her. She told herself it was just a nightmare, a trick of an exhausted mind. Then the floorboards beneath her bed vibrated, not creaked, vibrated, a tiny tremor, almost nothing, but enough. The tick-thud from the dream now inside her bones. She didn't wait for the sirens, didn't wait for shouting in the street. She lunged for the bassinet, wrapped my father in a thick wool blanket, didn't bother with shoes. At the bedroom door, she looked back. Moonlight slipped through a gap in the curtain, and above her pillow, a hairline crack spread across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, like a spider web. That's when she understood. The silence was a lie. The air felt charged, heavy. Something silent and massive was descending through the clouds, and she was the only person in the entire building who knew. The clock was already at 0. She didn't run down the stairs. She flowed, driven by something primal, adrenaline turning wood into clouds. Beneath her bare feet, she told me that in those moments, her body stopped belonging to her. It belonged to the baby. Every sense sharpened to a frequency she didn't know existed. She heard the muffled snores of the family on the second floor, the slow ticking of a grandfather clock in the foyer, even the distant panting of a stray dog in the alleyway. To everyone else, it was just another Tuesday night, a city numb to the threat of the sky. To her, every second felt like a stone dropping deeper into a well. When she reached the ground floor, she didn't head for the cellar. That was the logical choice, the one from the pamphlets. But her mother's finger, pointing at the earth, flashed through her mind like lightning. In the dream, the earth hadn't been safety. It had been a grave. A basement was just a hole, waiting to be buried. The tick-thud vibrated through her feet now, a low animal growl coming from the air itself. She passed the heavy iron door of the shelter and burst into the night. The cobblestones were sharp, icy. They tore at her skin. She barely felt it. The street was a ghost. No streetlights, no glowing windows, just jagged rooftops cutting into a sky that looked far too heavy. To stay up, she ran, not toward the city center, toward the open park, 3 blocks away. A girl in a white nightgown, clutching a bundle of blankets, sprinting through the dark while the world slept. Halfway down the second block, the sirens woke up, not all at once. A low, mournful moan, rising, stretching until it became a mechanical scream, like 1,000 iron lungs, gasping for air. Windows flew open, men shouted, children wailed. The neighborhood transformed from graveyard to hive. Get to the shelter. Someone yelled from above, "Girl, what are you doing?" She didn't stop, didn't look up. Her lungs burned. Each breath tasted like iron and cold soot. She reached the park, wide, flat, exposed to the wind, but free of walls. She ran to the center, far from trees, far from buildings. Then she collapsed, pulled my father beneath her, curled around him, a human shield. She pressed her ear to his chest, listened to his tiny heartbeat, fast, fragile, trying to drown out the roar, now filling the sky. Then silence, not peace, a vacuum, the kind of quiet before lightning strikes. The sirens were still screaming, but they faded, overtaken by something new, a soft rushing whistle, like wind through a narrow canyon, horrible and somehow beautiful. She looked back toward her apartment, her home, wedding photos on the mantle, laced doilies on the tables. Then a flash, white, blinding, not fire, just light, so pure she could see every blade of grass. Like it was noon, the shockwave hit, not wind, pressure, a solid wall that slammed her into the earth, pinned her there. Sound followed a heartbeat later, a roar so massive it felt like the planet had cracked. She watched, unable to move, as the building simply folded, not outward, inward, brick and mortar, collapsing into dust, a gray cloud, rising like a ghost into the moonlight. She lay in the mud, ears ringing, a high-pitched whine, drowning out the city screams. Heat spread across her back, fires already licking at the ruins. She looked down. My father was awake, eyes wide, reflecting the orange glow. He wasn't crying, just watching embers fall, like orange snow. That's when she realized the tick-thud had stopped. The clock was finished. But as she stared at the wreckage of her life, she saw movement near the tree line, a shadow, a figure, and it didn't look like a rescuer. The air was no longer air. It was a gritty, suffocating soup of pulverized limestone and burnt upholstery. My grandmother said the most haunting part wasn't the noise, it was the light. Fires from ruptured gas lines turned the night into a flickering bronze hell, casting long, distorted shadows that crawled along the remaining walls of neighboring blocks. She stayed pinned to the earth for what felt like hours. In reality, it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. Her body trembled uncontrollably, shock trying to shut her brain down. She kept her hand over my father's mouth, not to silence him, but to filter the thick gray soot, settling over everything like a funeral shroud. When she finally sat up, her knees felt like glass. She looked back at the space where her life had been. The building was gone, reduced to a jagged mound of rubble, a tomb of brick and broken dreams. She thought of the neighbors, the man with the curtains, the family on the second floor, and nausea hit her so hard she had to lean forward and press her forehead into the cold grass. They had followed the rules. They had gone to the basement, and because they were responsible, they were gone. She was alive because she listened to a ghost in a floral apron. That's when she saw him again. The shadow near the tree line wasn't her imagination. A man stood there, perfectly still, about 50 yards away. He wasn't dressed like a civilian. He wasn't a fire warden. He wore a heavy, dark overcoat that seemed to absorb the orange glow of the flames. He wasn't watching the ruins. He wasn't watching the survivors. He was watching her. The weight of his gaze was heavier than the shockwave in a city of thousands. In the middle of chaos, he was focused entirely on the woman in the white nightgown, holding a bundle of blankets. In the middle of a field, cold adrenaline crept through her, not the frantic kind, something slower, freezing. The realization that the dream might not have been a gift, it might have been a summons. She stood up, clutched my father so tightly. She feared she'd hurt him, and began backing away, toward the far edge of the park. The man didn't run. He didn't hurry. He simply walked, measured, calm, as if he knew exactly how far she could go before exhaustion took her. "Wait!" A voice called out, but it wasn't his. It was her neighbor, the woman from the third floor, stumbling out of the smoke. Her face was a mask of blood and dust, hands outstretched, wandering like a sleepwalker. My grandmother wanted to stop, to help, to offer the corner of her blanket, but every time she slowed, the tick-thud returned, not in the ground, in her head. Tick-thud, tick-thud, a warning, a psychic alarm. The danger wasn't over. She looked back at the man. He had stopped near the neighbor, but he didn't help her. He walked right past, as if the bleeding woman were furniture. His eyes never left my grandmother. That's when she understood. The dream hadn't just been about the bomb. Her mother hadn't been pointing at the ground. She had been pointing at a path. My grandmother turned and ran into the deeper shadows of the city's outskirts, away from the fires, away from the screams. She ducked into a narrow alley, behind industrial warehouses, collapsed behind stacked wooden crates. Her breathing came in ragged, sobbing gasps. She tried to slow her heart, tried to think. "I know you heard the clock." The voice was soft, barely louder than the wind, but it sounded like it came from right behind her ear. She spun around, Her back slammed into cold brick. The alley was empty, or at least it looked that way, but the air smelled wrong. Dry, earthy, like scorched wheat, a smell that didn't belong. In a city of steel and smoke, she looked down at my father. For the first time that night, he moved. His tiny hand lifted, and he pointed toward the shadows at the end of the alley. His eyes weren't confused. They weren't afraid. They were filled with something ancient, something that recognized what was waiting. The man in the overcoat stepped into the weak, flickering light of the alley. Up close, he didn't look like a soldier, and he didn't look like a phantom. He looked hollowed out, a man carved down to exhaustion. His face mirrored hers so perfectly, it made her stomach twist. He stopped 10 feet away, kept his hands visible like someone approaching. A wounded animal. The tick-thud in her head rose to a deafening crescendo, and then it stopped. The silence afterward was so heavy, it felt like her ears were bleeding. "You weren't the only one," the man said. His voice sounded like dry leaves, skittering across pavement. "There were 7 of us in this district, 7 who saw the field, 7 who heard the clock." He glanced at the bundle in her arms. Something softened in his face. "Pity. Most of them didn't listen," he said. "They thought they were losing their minds. They stayed in bed, tried to pray the noise away. But you," he met her eyes, "you ran." My grandmother didn't relax. The tension between them pressed against her chest like a physical force. That's when she understood. The dream hadn't been mercy. It was a filter. The war was a meat grinder. But there were things older than nations, sharper than steel, looking for something specific in the wreckage. "Why are you following me?" she hissed. "What do you want with my son?" The man looked up. The orange glow of the city was being swallowed by a sudden, unnatural fog. "I don't want anything," he whispered. "I'm just the one who was supposed to make sure the bloodline didn't end in a basement." He looked back at her. "You think your mother saved you? Maybe she did. Or maybe she was just the only face your mind could use to translate the warning." His eyes darkened. "You've been marked by survival. That mark doesn't wash off. It stays in the marrow. It gets passed down." Then he turned, walked into the fog, and disappeared before she could ask another question. She didn't chase him. She stayed hidden until morning bled through the smoke, turning the city into a graveyard of gray ash. She eventually found a refugee center. Thousands of people, all of them lost. She never told them about the dream, never told the doctors why she'd been in a field in her nightgown. She knew telling the story would invite the ticking back. Years turned into decades. The war became a history lesson, but the inherited survival never left her. She said it felt like living on borrowed time, like the bomb was still falling, just very, very slowly. She saw it in my father too, the way he tilted his head at sounds no one else heard, the way he always sat with his back to the wall. Then she took my hand. Her grip was strong, too strong for a woman of 85. "I haven't heard the clock in 40 years. She whispered, "until this morning." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, focused. The air felt thick again. I smelled scorched wheat, and then I looked at you. Her voice broke, and I knew why I was still here. "It wasn't to save your father," she said. "It was to tell you what to do when your turn comes." She leaned closer. Her breath smelled of peppermint and old secrets. "When the silence gets too loud, don't look for a reason. Don't wait for sirens. Grab what you love and run. Don't look back at the house. Don't look back at the life you thought you had. Just run until you hit the grass." She let go of my hand. Cold lingered where her fingers had been. The story was over, but the air in the kitchen felt heavy, charged, just like the night of the blast. I left her house that day and walked to my car. My heart thudded, slightly off rhythm. I looked up at the clear blue sky. For a split second, the blue bruised into a pulsating purple. I reached into the back seat, checked my go bag, the one I'd started keeping there 6 months ago. For no reason I could explain, the cycle of the survivor isn't about peace. It's about the eternal wait for the next tick-thud to begin, and that's where tonight's story ends. No answers, no closure, just a warning passed down quietly. If you felt something while listening, that heaviness in the air, that strange sense of waiting, maybe it's not just a story. Maybe it's a reminder. So if you're still here, thank you for listening all the way through. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, the ones that linger long after they're over, you can subscribe to Moonlight Tales and join us again under the dark. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep your go bag close, and if the silence ever gets too loud, don't wait. Good night. Crescent Moon.